Hello, I'm Susan Somerville.
And I'm Wayne Somerville.
We pay our respects to the Gidable traditional owners of the land that we live and work on. We need the wisdom of their elders, past and present, if we are to live gracefully in the Australian landscape.
Over the 40 years that we've lived on Creek's Bend in the Northern Rivers, an ecological catastrophe has rolled across the countryside. A form of dieback, linked to the invasive weed lantana, now devastates eucalypt forests along much of Australia's eastern seaboard.
We're here to tell you how, on our property, we cure the disease known as Bell Miner Associated Dieback. In this video, we'll discuss the problem and describe the solution. Once you've watched this video, if you wish, you can visit our website to book a place on a tour to see firsthand the bush regeneration work on Creek's Bend.
We're not professional bush regenerators. We're not advising you to do any specific thing with your land or forests. We'll tell you about what we've done and what works for us on our property. You choose what you do on your land. It's your responsibility to comply with relevant regulations and safety guidelines when working in forests. We made this video to inform thinking about how to best manage forests. We're not offering training or recommending any particular technique. We accept no liability for the effects of decisions you make regarding management of your forests. Feel free to copy and distribute this video, but please make sure you acknowledge the authors and only reproduce it in a full and unedited form.
We'll now give you some background about our property. We've lived on Creek's Bend since the late 1970s. Our 480-hectare property is west of Kyogle, adjacent to Tunumbar and Richmond Range State Forests. Creek's Bend is downstream from Tunumbar National Park's World Heritage Rainforests and upstream from Tunumbar Dam. The property consists of a series of steep ridges running from the Richmond Range in the west to flats along the Ironpot Creek in the east. About a quarter of the property is a working cattle farm, the rest is native forest. The dry sclerophyll forests along the ridgetops are predominantly grey gum, ironbark, spotted gum, bloodwood and tallowood. In the valleys there are brushbox, turpentine, flooded gum, blue gum and rainforest species.
What went wrong with the bush? This 1948 Lands Department photo of Creek's Bend shows forests fractionated by clearing and logging. The gaps in the forests where trees were taken look like a shotgun pattern. By 1975, when this picture was taken, the clearing is more extensive, the logging heavier, and the forest is full of big holes. The previous owner cleared remote areas in steep country for timber and cattle. When we moved to Tunumbar in the 1970s, we could ride horses through forests that were open with a grassy understory. Logging on Creek's Bend ended when we took over in the late 1970s, but heavy logging continued in the adjoining state forests during the 1980s and 90s.
Back in the 1980s, we naively expected that if we just left the forest alone it would regrow. Foresters believed that even if you heavily logged them, native forests would keep coming back. They argued that felling mature trees rejuvenates a forest, and selective logging makes way for younger trees by letting in more light and space. As the lantana became obvious, many people thought the weed was not a problem because it fertilizes and holds the soil together.
But then, the destructive connection between logging, lantana and dieback became all too obvious. By the late 1980s, lantana had taken over the Tunumbar Valley. The weed had replaced much of the understory. You couldn't see through the forest. You certainly couldn't walk through it.
On old parish maps, our property is named Bellbird. Bell miners, native honey-eaters commonly known as bellbirds, have always been in Tunumbar. They used to be restricted to gullies, but now, thanks to the lantana, the bell miners could go everywhere, and their numbers went through the roof.
In this high-resolution aerial photo of Creek's Bend taken for us in 2004, you can still see the shotgun pattern of gaps in the forest, but there's something new here. Tune your eyes to the light green colour that fills the holes. This is lantana, and it's now all through the bush. In 2004, lantana made up about 50 to 60% of the forest as seen from the air. Lantana was out of control, and there was little to nothing we could do about it. The following scenes are from the Tunumba Valley. In 1999, we noticed that Tunumba's forests were changing colour. They were going from the normal blue-green of eucalypts to an unhealthy-looking brown, and it was spreading in a front across the valley. Trees were dying, and the forest rang with the calls of bell miners. Lantana hedges as tall as houses formed an impenetrable green thicket where only ticks and bush lice thrived. Once abundant koalas, gliders, possums and other creatures were disappearing fast. We used to hear lots of koalas and see gliders, but not anymore.
We read the scientific literature and came up with this model of the pathogenic system that operates in dieback-affected forests. We included the model in our 2011 paper published in a peer-reviewed journal. When logging breaks the canopy, the forest system is fundamentally changed. Lantana invades, replacing the native ground cover and forest midstory. The lantana adds humus and alters soil chemistry, affecting tree health. The increased nitrogen in the eucalypt leaves attracts sap-sucking insects called psyllids. For protection, the psyllid insects form sugary coatings known as lerps over themselves. Birds like to eat the sugar and the insects, but due to a quirk of nature, when the bell miners eat the lerps, their beaks don't remove the underlying insects. So the psyllid lives on to form another sugary coating, and insect numbers increase. The lantana protects bell miner nests from egg predators. With this breeding advantage, bell miner populations explode, and this territorial bird chases away other birds that normally eat the insects. Trees repeatedly defoliate in a futile attempt to throw off the insects. Seed production fails, trees die, and the forest ecosystem collapses.
We looked at our model and asked where the key to the problem could be. Where might we break the vicious cycle of forest decline? It made no sense to change soil chemistry, and even if we could misnet and kill thousands of bell miners, their populations would rebound as soon as we stopped the coal. To protect the seed stock, we could inject hundreds of trees with systemic insecticide to kill the psyllids. But even if any of these things was practical, we'd still have a landscape covered in lantana. Psyllid insects and bell miners are native to the Australian bush. There are too many of them because the forest system is out of balance. Aside from the original logging and canopy disturbance, lantana is the only part of the dieback forest system that's out of place. We identified lantana as the villain.
At first, little was known about this form of dieback. But one thing was certain. Wherever you found dying trees, there were plague numbers of bell miners, so it seemed appropriate to name the problem Bell Miner Associated Dieback, which is also known by its acronym BMAD. The name Bell Miner Associated Dieback implied that a solution to the problem had to involve doing something about the bell miners. Consequently, thousands of the birds have been killed to no good effect. But Wayne and I don't blame the bell miners for the mess. We think of the birds as friends that help with our bush regeneration work. As we walk through the forests, their calls tell us where we'll find a lantana hedge and how big it's likely to be. The more birds, the louder the noise, the bigger the hedge.
We think the problem should be called lantana-associated dieback, or as forest expert and protector Dylan Pugh suggested, logging-associated dieback. In fact, from here on, we'll call it lantana-associated dieback. Even though lantana is a declared weed of national significance, and the New South Wales government lists Bell Miner Associated Dieback as a key threatening process to biodiversity, the New South Wales government proposes to log native forests with no follow-up weed control. They even argue that dieback-affected state forests should be logged to get the remaining value out of them. They wrongly assume that rehabilitating these sick forests would be difficult or even impossible. The truth is that logging native forests is no free lunch, and Lantana Associated Dieback is readily curable. Forestry cannot be all take and no give. Forests are not like mines. Their productivity cannot be increased by just cutting more trees and going further into old growth areas. Forests have to be managed like gardens and farms. How long can you grow vegetables if you never weed your garden? How can a farm go on producing if you don't prevent invasive weeds from taking over?
How did we get from this fractured, lantana-infested forest in 2004 to this in 2018? There are still some holes in the forest, but the shotgun pattern evident for more than 80 years has now gone. Dieback might be a complex problem, but it has a simple solution. Remove the lantana and keep it out until the forest recovers. It's as simple as that. Saving our dieback-affected forests is very doable, and killing lantana can be easy and fun. When we removed lantana, native plants reclaimed the under and mid-story, and as gaps in the canopy closed, the light reaching the forest floor returned to normal. The canopy does not have to be continuous, as in a rainforest, to keep lantana from dominating. So long as the light reaching the forest floor has a dappled quality, never direct light for too long, lantana can only exist as a spindly vine. As the treated lantana rots away, soil moisture and nutrient levels normalize, native animals can move about again, and bell miners and their nests are exposed to currawongs, goannas, and other predators. With increased mortality rates and falling egg production, the existing bell miners see out their brief lifespan of 2 to 3 years. That's why we still hear bell miners for a couple of years after the lantana is removed from an area. As the bell miners die out, other psyllid-eating birds return to the area.
We'll show you some sites on Creek's Bend before and after we removed lantana. First up, here's a 2007 still photo panorama of an area we know as the log clearing. Notice the thin canopy of the blue gums that are severely affected by dieback. Notice the way the lantana climbs right up the trees. To break into this area, I had to push my tractor through 1/2 kilometre of old logging track that was filled with lantana. And then we bought a video camera. The next clip is of the same log clearing site, again in 2007, but taken 3 months after the lantana was treated. You can see the lantana starting to collapse. It'll turn to dust after about 6 months. Listen to the bell miners. And that's where you saw the tractor on the previous slides. Here's the same log clearing spot in 2018. Now all you can hear is our creaky camera tripod that needs oiling and my boots crunching leaves. The next video is of an area we call Blue Gum, taken in 2007, 3 months after the lantana was treated. You can still see dead lantana and you can hear bell miners. Here's the same blue gum area in 2018. Notice the birds and the healthy structure of the bush. The lantana has been replaced by ginger and other natives. Here's the grey gum site in 2007. You can still see the dead lantana 3 months after treatment. This is the grey gum site today in 2018. This is an area we call the cliff track, 3 months after the lantana was treated in 2007. And here is the cliff track as it is now.
In the next clip of an area we call Palm Creek, taken in 2007, the lantana was treated 20 months previously. You can see the gaps left in the forest after the lantana disappeared. You can't miss the sound of the bell miners. The next video is of the same spot, Palm Creek, in 2018. Listen to the other bird species. Notice the more complex mid and understory. The next video, taken in 2007, is of an area we call Outward Bound, 20 months after treatment. The grey areas on the ground indicate where the lantana was. Again, there's lots of bell miners. Here's the same outward bound area in 2018, but now all you can hear is our tripod and footsteps. And finally, the area known as Bloodwood, which was also treated in 2007, 20 months prior to what you see in the video. And here's the Bloodwood site in 2018.
Once we decided to get rid of lantana, the question was how? Over the years, we did many things to try to treat Lantana Associated Dieback. We cleared lantana with a tractor and replanted. The initial effect looked good, but when we couldn't follow up and keep the lantana out, the weed reclaimed the area in a couple of years. We removed a dam in the forest to see if that decreased bell miner numbers. It didn't. We carried out cool burns to stimulate native regrowth and hotter burns to ignite the lantana. Cool fires in open areas encourage native species to germinate, but the fire can also kill off small seedlings. We found it very difficult to get the right conditions for using a hot fire on lantana. If it's dry enough for lantana to burn, it's usually too dry to control the resulting fire.
We installed nesting boxes to encourage other species of birds, but had problems with the durability of the boxes. When we hacked lantana with a brush hook, the stump quickly resprouted. We pull out a lot of the weed by hand. Lantana in the forest usually has shallow roots and is easy to pull out. To prevent resprouting, we get as much of the root as we can, and then hang the lantana upside down on a nearby plant. Lantana bushes that are out in the open tend to be too firmly set in the ground to pull out by hand. A landowner we know uses pigs to remove lantana from inaccessible areas on his property. Traditionally, lantana has been oversprayed with glyphosate. We think this is a poor option for bush regeneration because it kills native seedlings that might be underneath, and it leaves a dead patch for lantana and other weeds to recolonize. Overspraying involves large amounts of herbicide and heavy machinery, which makes it impractical in our steep, rugged country.
But for the landscape scale problem we have on Creeks Bend, our best option is the technique known as splattergun. We got involved with splattergun in 2005 when Susan told me John Hunter's story of how his father killed lantana by squirting it with small amounts of concentrated glyphosate. I realised that, if true, John's story had profound implications. I took the nozzle off a cattle drench gun so it squirted a jet of large droplets, made up a mix, put some on a lantana hedge, and it worked a treat. We could kill lantana with what was, in effect, a water pistol. John Hunter heard about what we'd done and organised scientific trials of the method on Creeks Bend, in state forests and in a national park. Over years, with the support of a number of agencies, we adapted the method to treat large lantana hedges. More than a decade on, we've refined the method and treated hundreds of hectares of lantana-infested forest. For this work, in 2013, Susan received the Northern Rivers Individual Land Carer of the Year award.
Splattergun is now used far and wide. Across the creek, a skilled team of indigenous bush regenerators, the Githable Rangers, are using splattergun and other methods to regenerate the state forest and national park that they have native title responsibility for. With splattergun, we can kill lantana in rugged country as fast as we can walk. We apply the herbicide in discrete lines of large droplets, so there's minimal chemical runoff, and native plants quickly regenerate through the lantana carcasses. The focused jet makes it possible for us to selectively remove lantana from around other plants. And if we accidentally hit a susceptible species, such as white cedar, the affected branch usually just burns off and the tree doesn't die.
The splattergun technique is not limited to any one kind of equipment. In the video, you saw a gas-powered backpack being used. These are great for working deep in the bush, but we've adapted other gear to deliver the large droplets that are the essential feature of the method. In more accessible areas, we use a small 4-wheel drive with a 100-litre spray tank. I adapted an old rumen injecting needle to the wand to deliver large droplets. With Susan driving and me working the wand, we can quickly kill lantana up to 30 metres either side of a track. We get through a follow-up along one of our main tracks in an hour or two. Our contractor, Grant Gibson, uses a state-of-the-art spray unit that allows him to kill lantana 100 metres or so from a track. You'll see some of Grant's work in steep country if you visit Creeks Bend to inspect the bush regeneration process.
However we remove the lantana, we find it essential to follow up every year or two until the forest recovers. The treated lantana does not regrow, but new plants appear from seed. This is a map of the tracks we maintain on Creeks Bend. Most of the forest along these tracks is essentially lantana and dieback free. This graphic of the treatment history of one track on our property will give you a rough idea of the cost of chemicals and labor involved in this work. In this case, over 13 years, we spent about 350 hours putting out 255 liters of glyphosate for a total cost of about $1,500 for chemicals. This works out to be a yearly average of about 27 hours of labor and 19 liters of glyphosate at a cost of about $118 for materials per year. Naturally enough, the first knockdown takes us the most time in glyphosate, and follow-ups require progressively less and less time and chemical. We've heard two arguments against removing lantana from forests. Both are based on true statements. Some say that you shouldn't kill lantana because native birds live in it. It's true that bell miners nest in the hedges, and the thought of protecting bird nests generates positive feelings. But, as you now know, this benefit comes at a great cost. The bell miners chase all other birds away, and the lantana wipes out many native animals and plants that would normally live in the forest.
The second objection, that glyphosate should not be used because it's a carcinogenic poison, is more likely to thwart efforts to cure landscape-scale dieback. In 2015, the World Health Organization classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans. Glyphosate is in the Group 2A category that includes lead, UV radiation, creosote, emissions from frying and household wood fires, being a hairdresser, working in the petroleum industry, and doing shift work. So it's a fair dinkum risk. The more dangerous, definitely carcinogenic Group 1 category includes asbestos, benzene, particulate matter in air pollution, alcoholic beverages, diesel exhaust, processed meats, soot and wood dust, aluminium production, glass making and tobacco smoking.
Glyphosate is hazardous. It must be used with care. We strongly agree that glyphosate should not be used in public places, and especially where children play. For us, it's obvious that using glyphosate on crops for human and animal consumption is a bad idea because the chemical gets into the food chain. But we are arguing the case for using glyphosate in splatterguns to regenerate forests. We have to weigh up the costs and benefits of using the herbicide. The risks are real, but the benefits are substantial.
This is how we see it. Fossil fuel technology, chainsaws, bulldozers, trucks created the scars and gaps in the forest that are now chock full of lantana. This disruption went far beyond what men with horses, axes and hand saws could ever do. Humans used technology to create this mega-sized mess. Now we need technology to fix it. We reckon that using glyphosate to save forests is like producing solar panels for renewable energy. Our solar panels came with a carbon footprint and a pollution debt. The mining and manufacture of the glass, aluminium, silicon and lead in solar panels are all Category 1 definitely carcinogenic processes. China's factories are powered by coal and gas, some of which comes from Australia. So some of the pollution debt owing on our solar panels is local. Our solar panels were transported by diesel-powered ships, trucks and utes. When we use solar panels, we accept the pollution that's created when they're manufactured and transported. It takes a few years to pay off the pollution debt on panels, but then we have sustainable, clean energy. The splattergun method also entails pollution, but with dieback cured, our healthy forests are self-sustaining, potentially forever. Leaves use the sun's energy to create the trees and plants that make up a forest. Trees sequester carbon. Forests are the lungs of the planet. They support essential biodiversity and filter precious water.
If we don't save our forests, the lantana and dieback will devastate biodiversity and could fuel firestorms that release massive amounts of atmospheric carbon and air pollution. We think of glyphosate as good medicine for sick forests. This is no addictive drug that the bush has to rely on in order to survive. It's like a treatment that you take and then stop using when you're well. As the forest recovers, we use less and less herbicide during follow-ups. In many areas, we use splattergun once and then never again. We're amazed at the improvements we see from even a single treatment. It comes down to our choice. It's a matter of opinion that old-growth forest is better than a weed patch. Mother Nature doesn't care if our grandchildren inherit nothing but lantana. She's not going to fix the problem. It's up to all of us how much of Australia's once magnificent forest estate we pass on.
For us, it makes no sense to let our forests degrade when we know how to repair them cheaply and easily. We reckon it's time to create a lantana-free Northern Rivers. This is the first step to curing lantana-associated dieback along Australia's eastern seaboard. The job is doable. The economic, environmental and social benefits are compelling.